Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to a deep dive into something truly extraordinary, as presented in the sources you've shared with us. Today, we are immersing ourselves in the world of the Christos technique.
Yeah, it's quite a journey we're embarking on here.
It really is. We've got a remarkable stack of material laid out here. Transcripts capturing the vivid words of people actually undergoing this technique, alongside books and articles that meticulously document, well, everything. The procedure, the reported experiences, and the extensive theoretical system that gives it all context.
And these aren't just brief overviews, are they? They're quite detailed accounts.
Exactly. They're deep dives in themselves, into the mechanics and the meaning according to those who developed and practiced it. So our mission, as always in the deep dive, is to become really well-informed on this specific body of work. We're going to explore the Christos technique exactly as these sources describe it, without bringing in outside interpretation or, skepticism.
Right. The goal is understanding it from the inside out, based purely on this material.
Precisely. We want to understand its purported function, walk through the procedure step by step as it's detailed here, and explore the, well, frankly surprising range of potential outcomes and experiences they report. This is all about seeing the world, or perhaps multiple worlds, through the specific lens these materials provide.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is that the sources present this not just as some interesting experiment in consciousness, but as a very specific, powerful and intentional method.
Right.
They lay out this comprehensive model of reality and the self, suggesting that certain experiences and insights are directly accessible if you follow this structured approach.
It's like they're handing you a map and instructions, aren't they?
Yeah.
For exploring entirely different dimensions of awareness.
Yeah.
So the central question for this deep dive is, according to these sources, what is the Christos technique?
Yeah.
How is it performed in practice? And what does it purportedly reveal about consciousness, the self, and maybe even the very nature of creation?
Okay. Let's step into this framework then and see what the sources tell us.
Great. So where do we start? The definition, I suppose.
Let's start right there with how the sources define it. It's consistently referred to as an awareness technique.
Okay, awareness technique. Not, say, meditation or hypnosis.
Well, it's strongly associated with William Swigart and his collaborators, who get the credit for its development and dissemination. And a really crucial distinction made right off the bat in the sources is that it is not hypnosis.
Not hypnosis, okay.
Yeah, one text explicitly states, and I'm quoting loosely here, you cannot be hypnotized while you are working with 3 planes of consciousness, which suggests the technique engages a different level of awareness, one they see as incompatible with a typical hypnotic state.
Interesting. So what is its purpose then, according to them?
Well, the core purpose, as articulated in these materials, is to enable the individual undergoing the process, and they call them the experimentee or subject,
Right.
to essentially dream while fully conscious.
A waking dream.
Exactly. It's presented as a means to achieve and consciously control a lucid dream state. This allows for conscious exploration of what they call altered states of consciousness, or ASCs.
Okay.
And the sources claim this can facilitate access to experiences that feel like past lives or perhaps other realms, or just deeper aspects of reality. Ultimately, the technique is framed as a tool for pretty profound self-discovery.
Leading to a deeper understanding of your own consciousness and spirit.
That's the idea. That's how it's presented.
So it's about achieving that state of being conscious within a dream, but deliberately, using a specific procedure. And the sources suggest it's unusually effective or maybe unique in this.
Yes, they definitely highlight what they see as its unique capabilities. They claim it can induce lucid dreams with conscious two-way communication between the guide, the person leading the session, and the subject.
Two-way communication during the experience.
That's what they report. And furthermore, for some individuals, it's presented as providing a platform, a launching pad, if you will, for generating out-of-body experiences, OBEs.
OBEs.
Okay. And even achieving profound peak experiences. You know, those intensely positive, sometimes spiritual moments of heightened awareness and understanding, sort of like what Abraham Maslow described.
Like those moments of transcendence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sources actually link this capability to exploring consciousness on a continuum, where lucid dreaming and OBEs eventually kind of merge together.
Okay, so it's built on a whole model of how consciousness works.
Yes, this entire technique is built upon and really only makes sense within a specific, quite intricate cosmological model presented in the sources.
Right.
The fundamental premise is that human consciousness isn't just limited to the physical body or this physical reality we experience daily. It exists, they say, on multiple planes of consciousness. Our everyday waking awareness is primarily anchored here in the physical world, which the sources call the third plane, or sometimes the detail of
The
it.
detail level. Okay.
So the Christos technique, then, is designed specifically to help an individual become consciously aware of these other planes and to integrate with the aspects of their consciousness that reside there.
It sounds like the technique is just inextricably linked to this specific view of reality. Like, you can't really understand the how without understanding the why in their particular system.
You've hit it exactly. And that system is quite specific. The creation itself, they describe it as being composed of two fundamental opposing parts, spirit and creation material.
Spirit and creation material. Opposing.
Opposing in polarity, yes. Spirit is characterized as having a negative polarity. It's described as light, always in motion, and importantly, untransmutable, meaning it can't be changed or broken down.
Okay. Negative, light, motion, untransmutable. Got it.
Creation material, on the other hand, has a positive polarity. It's described as dark, still, and transmutable. It can be shaped, formed, altered.
Positive, dark, still, transmutable.
Okay. And your individual spirit, your spirit, is described as the very center of you. It's seen as a fundamental part of the Creator's being, released into creation initially as a simple elemental form of spirit, which is actually named by the Creator at that first moment.
Wow. Okay, so we start as an elemental spirit.
According to this framework, yes. And this elemental spirit is given a command, which the sources describe as the first recording in the very soul.
A command.
Yes, this command from the Creator is, go, know my creation, and return it to me.
Go know my creation and return it to me.
That's it. And the entire journey of the spirit through existence, through all the planes, all the lifetimes, is framed as the process of fulfilling this command. Moving through creation, initiating actions, experiencing the results, completing cycles, and then returning the awareness gained from these experiences back to the Creator.
So the Christos technique fits into this.
Yeah. It's positioned within this grand narrative as a direct, conscious way to maybe accelerate or deepen this process of knowing the creation and returning awareness. It's about the spirit using its consciousness, particularly the third plane consciousness, to deliberately explore the different facets of reality it exists within.
That's a really profound starting point for understanding the purpose behind the technique. It frames the whole exploration of consciousness as, well, a fundamental spiritual mission, doesn't it?
That's certainly how the sources present it.
Okay, so with that foundation, let's dive into the practical side. How, according to these very detailed sources, is the Christos technique actually performed? What are the steps involved for both the experimentee and the guide?
Right, the procedure. It's laid out with quite specific instructions. Let's walk through it step by step as it's described in the materials.
Okay. Step 1. Preparation. The physical setup seems key here.
It is. The experimentee needs to lie flat on their back, on the floor, not on a bed or couch, specifically the floor. They should have a cushion under their head for comfort. And they must take off their shoes, although wearing socks or stockings is fine. Lying flat on the floor is definitely emphasized.
Got it. Flat on the floor, cushion, no shoes. Step 2, initial relaxation. What happens then?
Almost immediately after they lie down, a physical aspect of the technique begins. The person guiding the session, they call this person the runner or guide.
Runner or guide. Okay.
They start massaging the experimentee's ankles. The sources specify doing this for about 2 or 3 minutes.
Just the ankles. Why?
It's described as helping to loosen the ankles. It seems to be presented primarily as a way to induce physical relaxation, just preparing the body for the process.
Okay, relaxing the body. What's next?
Yeah.
Step 3, the third eye massage. This sounds important.
It's presented as absolutely critical.
Wow.
Simultaneously with the ankle massage, the guide performs another key physical action, massaging the area they refer to as the third eye position.
Which is where exactly?
Located on the lower center of the forehead, right between the frontal lobes of the brain, in that sort of slight indentation many people have there.
Okay. And how is this massage done? Gently.
No. The sources get quite specific about the technique here. The guide should use the edge of a curved hand, kind of like you're cupping it slightly so it fits snugly into that spot. And the instructions emphasize intensity. It should be, and this is their phrase, vigorous rubbing till the experimentee feels his head really buzzing.
Buzzy, wow.
Yeah. This physical stimulation is presented as a vital catalyst. It's intended to activate or stimulate the specific area of consciousness, apparently. It's definitely not a gentle rub. It's meant to create a distinct physical sensation.
Okay, vigorous buzzing massage on the third eye, ankles being relaxed. Then
Right on.
Step 4, initial visualizations, building internal vision.
Right. So with the experimentee's eyes held firmly closed, that's another specific instruction, not just casually closed, the guide begins directing their consciousness. And the very first thing they're asked to visualize is something incredibly familiar. Their own front door.
Just visualize the front door.
Yeah.
But it's not passive, you said. The guide is active here.
Oh, absolutely not passive. This is where the guide's active role really kicks in, and it's crucial. The guide must ask many questions, the sources stress as many as possible, to keep the experimentee talking and describing what they're visualizing.
Like what kind of questions?
Things like, describe the door. What color is it? What's the doorknob like? Are there any pictures or decorations around the door? What are you standing on? Is there anything above you? It's relentless questioning.
And the purpose of all this questioning?
It's very deliberate. They call it a detail exercise. And its goal, according to the sources, is twofold. First, to help the person find details within their internal awareness, and second, to get them accustomed to seeing without using their physical eyes. It's about activating and utilizing what they call expanded consciousness.
Training that inner sight almost.
So that seems to be the idea.
Yeah.
But it's worth pausing here because one source, particularly drawing on the observations of people like G.M. Glaskin, who worked extensively with these methods, points out a potential challenge right at this stage.
Oh.
Well, the technique relies heavily on visualization, and that can be really difficult for what are sometimes called haptic people.
Yeah.
You know, individuals who process the world primarily through touch and physical sensation rather than strong visual imagery.
Right. Not everyone is strongly visual.
Exactly. And forcing these individuals into intense visualization right from the start can apparently create significant psychological inhibition, maybe even distress. So the sources do acknowledge that for such individuals, these initial preliminary exercises might need to be modified or replaced with something more suited to their way of processing things.
That's a really key nuance, acknowledging individual differences.
Yeah.
Okay, so assuming they navigate the front door visualization, where does the guide take them next in this internal landscape?
They're asked to visualize stepping back from the door, then describe the porch, the steps, or maybe the walkway leading away. And again, the guide peppers them with specific questions. How many steps are there? What are they made of? Is there a railing? It's all about reinforcing this practice of detailed internal description. Keep them talking.
Okay, so still focus on the immediate home environment.
Yeah.
Then, step 5, ascending and widening awareness.
Right. Once they seem comfortable describing their immediate surroundings internally, the guide directs the experimentee to visualize standing on top of their own roof.
On the roof.
Yeah. And describe what they see from that height, the garden, the street, the surrounding properties.
Okay, changing the perspective.
Exactly. This step, according to the sources, is specifically aimed at getting the person accustomed to seeing or perceiving from different, increasingly distant vantage points. It's about expanding their range of awareness.
Makes sense. And then they go higher.
Yes. Then they're asked to gently rise up or float into the air. The guide is specifically instructed to reassure them that this is safe.
I imagine that might feel a bit weird.
Probably. And as they ascend, they're asked to describe what they see below as the perspective changes the land, houses, roads, maybe eventually the entire town shrinking beneath them.
Okay.
And the sources note that some individuals report a very interesting sensation during this phase, being consciously aware of their physical body lying there on the floor and simultaneously feeling themselves floating high up in the air.
That dual awareness again.
Yes, it's a recurring theme. And during this ascent phase, they're also prompted to practice changing the scene from day to night and then back to day again, describing the visual differences they perceive internally.
Changing day to night, like actively controlling the scene.
Apparently so. One reported experience mentioned everything turning completely black when asked to make it night, then shifting back to an overcast daytime scene upon changing back.
Wow. That transition from a familiar view to a bird's eye perspective, and even changing the time of day. It sounds like it's really training the consciousness to be more flexible, maybe less tied to the immediate physical reality.
That certainly seems to be the goal presented in the sources. Training wheels for consciousness, perhaps.
Okay, step 6, transitioning to another lifetime place. This sounds like where it really shifts gears.
This is the pivot point. While the experimentee is floating high in the air, the guide gives the instruction that initiates what's usually interpreted as the past life exploration phase. The specific wording provided is, "Come back to Earth in another lifetime that you lived many years ago."
Come back to Earth in another lifetime. Okay. How do they land?
The instruction for landing is quite deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
They should come down quickly and firmly but gently and stand on the ground.
Quickly but gently.
And the guide is told to pay close attention to the experimentee's physical body at this moment, specifically watching for eye movement under their eyelids. Rapid eye movement, perhaps? This is presented as a sign that their consciousness has shifted and they are now there in that other time or place.
And the first question upon landing is critical.
Absolutely crucial. The sources stress this. The immediate prompt is, please look down at your feet and tell me what you're wearing on your feet.
Look down at your feet. Why the feet?
The sources don't explicitly state why, but it seems to be a grounding technique, maybe. Something very specific and sensory to anchor their awareness in the new scene immediately. It's consistently the first question.
Usually. And then what's the main instruction for them once they're there?
The fundamental instruction given for navigating this new internal environment is look out through your eyes and listen through your ears.
Like they're really there, perceiving directly.
That's the framing. It reinforces the idea that they are perceiving this environment directly, as though physically present. And the guide continues questioning relentlessly about their clothing, lower down, the environment around them. Is it land, sea, buildings? What do the buildings look like? Any people they see?
And keep them talking.
Yes, the sources reiterate, the more talk, the better he will see in the beginning. The talking helps anchor and solidify the internal vision. And the guide must insist, apparently, that the person only do what they are told and only answer the questions asked, keeping the questions in some semblance of chronological order within the lifetime being explored.
Chronological order within that life.
And the sources, well, they're quite definitive about the validity of what is experienced here, from their perspective anyway. They state that after guiding just a few people through this, one will understand that the material is valid and that the person is experiencing a good vision of a previous life.
So presented not as fantasy, but as accessing real, though maybe non-physical, information about a past existence.
That's exactly how it's presented in these texts. It's a strong claim embedded right within the instructions for the guide. The goal is to make the perceived experience as real and detailed as possible through this constant questioning and description.
Okay, step 7, moving through the experience. So they've landed, described their feet, the surroundings. They don't just stay put.
No, it's dynamic. Once the scene is established, the guide keeps the person moving forward in time within that lifetime. They instruct them to say, skip a day, then a week, a month, a year, or even longer periods. And the questioning and description continue throughout these jumps in time. It's an active exploration of that life's timeline.
Exploring the narrative of that life. What about specific events? Step 8, the live-through incident.
Yes, as they move through the lifetime, the guide is instructed to steer the exploration towards significant events, particularly what the sources specifically call the live-through incident.
What's that exactly?
It's described as an incident that bothered the individual at the time it happened in that life. And in the Christos session, they are essentially reliving it or seeing it play through again in detail.
Why focus on bothersome incidents?
Well, this is presented as being directly connected to the concept of unfinished business. The sources explain that the third plane permanent body of consciousness, which we'll definitely need to delve into more when we talk cosmology, works closely with the spirit. And it helps bring forward information about this unfinished business, especially, they say, with the assistance of the spirit. Experiencing or re-experiencing this incident in detail is seen as a way to process or understand it, maybe release it.
Ah, so there's a therapeutic or like problem-solving aspect linked directly to revisiting these specific past events.
According to the sources, absolutely. Resolving this unfinished business is explicitly tied to releasing energetic or psychological burdens they believe are carrying forward from that time.
Okay, that makes sense within their framework.
Yeah.
What about exploring more than one life? Step 9, exploring multiple lives and death.
Yes. After running through one lifetime, or maybe parts of it, the person is asked to go to an earlier lifetime. They use the same landing prompt, come back to Earth, and look down at your feet.
Same procedure.
Right. The sources suggest running through perhaps 2 or 3 lifetimes or even more, maybe in a single session or spread across multiple sessions. And after exploring several lives, the person is then instructed to die within the experience and follow through the process of death. The guide asks simply, what happens next?
Asking them to experience death, that sounds intense.
It does. And this phase explores the transition beyond a single physical life. And there's a crucial, really emphatic instruction given to the guide at this point in the sources. No matter what he reports, do not question the validity. This is new material for people to understand.
Don't question it. Wow.
Yeah, it highlights the potentially boundary-pushing nature of the reports that might emerge during this phase, and the absolute imperative within this framework to accept the subject's experience as valid information about, well, non-physical reality or transitional states between lives.
So accepting the experience as reported.
And after exploring incidents or states between lives, the person can also be guided, if desired, to find their present parents from the first time they perceive them as consciousnesses, perhaps before birth, right up until after being born. And the guide asks questions about this process of choosing or entering the current life.
That takes the exploration way beyond just the past life itself into the spaces before and after. The whole cycle.
Exactly. It's a very comprehensive exploration they're aiming for.
Okay, and finally, step 10. Ending the session and self-guidance. How do they wrap things up?
To conclude a session, the guide asks the experimentee if they feel a need to continue, essentially allowing them to decide when they're complete for that session. It's not abruptly cut off.
Right.
And for subsequent sessions, if they want to pick up where they left off, the person is given a mental instruction. Something like, turn the lights on inside, and quickly go back to where they were in their previous internal journey.
Like bookmarking their place.
Sort of, yeah. And an important goal of the technique, as described, is for the individual to eventually become self-sufficient. The sources state that after about 3 to 5 hours of being guided or coaching, a person should be prepared to run himself.
Run himself, meaning guide themselves.
Exactly. Learning to internalize the guide's role and ask themselves the necessary questions to navigate and explore their consciousness independently. Practice is heavily emphasized as being crucial for this self-guided process. The goal is for the individual to eventually be able to see an entire lifetime quickly, perhaps in minutes, and with all senses engaged. It's presented as a skill that requires development.
So it starts guided, but the aim is independent exploration. That covers the how in incredible detail. Now let's get into the what. What did people actually report experiencing during these sessions, according to the source material? The descriptions sound incredibly rich and varied.
They really are. One aspect that comes up again and again in the sources is the sheer vividness and detail of the experiences.
More vivid than dreams.
Consistently described that way, yes. Far more real, detailed, and much more easily recalled than typical dreams. Unlike normal dreams, which often feel fragmented and just, evaporate upon waking.
Gone in seconds sometimes.
Right. The experiences accessed via the Christos technique are reported to be remarkably clear and memorable. People could recall them in detail for days or even longer afterward.
And the level of detail.
The sources are just full of specific sensory details reported by subjects. They describe seeing the colors of clothing like a loose robe with intricate brocade or embroidered trousers, or the look of old boots worn without socks, or even flamboyant cloth shoes or moccasins that they felt getting wet.
Wow, specific textures and conditions.
Exactly. They reported architectural details, not just houses, but specific types. White rounded or domed structures, small unpaned window holes, stone buildings, those wooden houses in an Australian outback town around the turn of the century, a corrugated iron roof with bricks showing underneath, or particular trees like poplar trees.
Very concrete images.
Very. They saw specific landscapes, bulrushes growing in a marsh. They felt the sharpness of sand on bare feet, the cold of water, the heat from an open fire, or even a specific pressure on their head. One subject, remarkably, even noted the smell of a crowded train carriage.
Smell, too. So it's really multisensory.
Definitely. These aren't vague impressions in the reports. They're often presented as incredibly sharp, distinct sensory perceptions.
In the types of experiences reported, the exploration of perceived previous lives seems absolutely central, doesn't it?
It's presented as a very common, perhaps the most common outcome. Subjects described finding themselves inhabiting vastly different historical periods and locations.
Like where?
Oh, all sorts. Simple settlements that felt ancient, maybe ancient Egypt. The Australian outback you mentioned with horses and carts instead of cars or electric poles. A bustling marketplace in Europe from centuries ago. Being stranded on a remote island sufficient unto himself with only animals for company. A farmhouse near Geraldton in Western Australia. A cave or cavern situated under a railway bridge. A marshy area. Just a huge variety of settings.
And the identities they experienced. Were they always themselves, just in the past?
Not necessarily themselves as they are now. The identities were often quite varied. People reported experiencing being a woman if they were male in this life, or vice versa. Being a different height, tall and slim, or short, even describing being a tiny woman or having a different physical build.
Different features, too.
Yes, different physical features were common reports. Things like having a snub nose, freckles, ginger hair, a noticeably different or stronger jawline, or even having different skin color, like being brown-skinned. Some descriptions are very specific roles or types, being a tall figure adorned with particular ornaments, being a hunting or gathering human, a prisoner of war engaged in digging, being a shepherd.
These sound like fully formed characters or personas.
That's how they're described.
Yeah.
And the sources even include some really remarkable anecdotes, like that subject seeing themselves as a sneaky, sniveling character consumed by envy for his brother's power, and then witnessing that brother attempt to kill him with a scimitar.
Goodness, that's quite dramatic.
It is. These aren't just static images, they are lived-through narratives, according to the reports. And G.M. Glaskin, in his work drawing on these techniques, also noted some reports where subjects briefly experienced non-human forms, like feeling like a standing sheep or changing into a frog, though the details on this seem less prevalent in the specific core sources we're focusing on here.
That really brings the reported experiences to life.
Wow. Beyond these perceived past lives, the sources also link this technique to out-of-body experiences you mentioned.
Yes, that's another significant category of experience reported. For some individuals, the practice can reportedly lead to the sensation of being freed from the physical body, feeling like they're moving through the physical environment around them, or sometimes moving in what are described as mental, spiritual, or astral worlds.
So leaving the body behind, essentially.
That's the reported sensation. The sources explicitly connect lucid dreams and OBEs, viewing them as experiences that can actually merge into one another along a kind of continuum of altered states of consciousness. They even point out that the initial exercises in the Christos technique, like that feeling of stretching or expansion and floating, are quite similar to methods used specifically for inducing OBEs.
Like the technique intentionally taps into the pathways that might lead to such states.
It seems presented that way, yes, as if it's designed to potentially facilitate that shift in perception. And those peak experiences you mentioned earlier, what were they like?
The sources describe these as moments of, well, overwhelming intensity, but in a profoundly positive and enlightening way. States of consciousness where the person might feel a sense of fundamental unity with everything, or a feeling of transcendence, or gain deep insight into the nature of reality.
Like Maslow's peak experiences.
Exactly. They explicitly connect it to Maslow's concept, suggesting that accessing these states through the technique can generate or reveal core human values like goodness, truth, beauty, and wholeness.
It seems those initial visualization steps, like the floating and ascending, might not just be symbolic warm-ups then. Could they be literal descriptions of early stages of what they call astral consciousness control?
That's certainly how one source frames it, yeah, where you might actually be viewing the astral apparition of something physical, like a car or an airplane, from that higher perspective, that common childhood dream of being able to fly. It suddenly feels less like pure fantasy, and potentially within this specific framework, maybe a memory of an innate capability or something the technique allows conscious access to and control over.
Developing conscious control over that astral body.
That seems to be the idea presented, yes. That initial floating exercise is framed as practice for that, and the multisensory nature we talked about is key throughout all these experiences. It's not just visual seeing.
Right, you mentioned feeling and hearing.
Yes, auditory listening to sounds in the perceived environment, tactile feeling, the texture of clothing, the feel of the ground underfoot, the temperature of water, sometimes even pain or pressure, the wind, and yes, even olfactory, like that smelly train carriage. The goal seems to be a full immersion of consciousness in the perceived environment, engaging all available senses.
What about the emotional side? What kind of feelings did people report during these sometimes quite intense experiences?
Oh, the range of emotions reported is incredibly broad, which probably reflects the depth and variety of the experiences themselves. Subjects reported feeling intense excitement, exhilaration, astonishment, profound relief, and deep contentment.
So very positive feelings.
Often, yes, but also, significantly, fear. For instance, reports of fear of being alone, a specific fear of places without trees, or fear of birds flapping their wings nearby. There were also reports of boredom during certain phases, confusion, and sometimes outright distress, especially, it seems, when encountering particularly challenging aspects of a perceived past life or a difficult live-through incident. These experiences weren't necessarily always pleasant or easy,
No, I can imagine revisiting difficult things wouldn't be.
which leads us back to that idea of unfinished business. A really significant claim made repeatedly in the sources is that by revisiting and consciously living through these specific, often bothersome incidents from past lives, those lived through incidents, individuals found profound relief from recurring physical issues in their present life.
Actual physical issues.
Yeah.
What?
The sources list examples like chronic headaches, persistent sore throats, stomach or heart trouble, and potentially other long-standing or constantly recurring ailments.
And the theory is these are linked to the past life incident.
Exactly. The theory presented is that these current physical problems are somehow linked energetically or psychologically to choices made or situations experienced in a past life, creating a kind of knot or imbalance that persists. By consciously tracing back that free will choice or situation during the session, the individual can effectively understand and release the unfinished business.
And this release has physical effects.
Getting rid of this is repeatedly described in the sources as relieving a great deal of weight or feeling, leading to significant physical and emotional relief in the present. It's presented as a direct link between the past life exploration and present-day physical and emotional well-being.
That's a really powerful purported application using this technique for practical healing by addressing what they see as karmic or historical roots.
It's presented as absolutely central to the claimed benefits, yes.
And throughout all these varied experiences, whether it's a vivid past life, an OBE, a peak experience, or resolving unfinished business, what about the person's awareness? Are they completely lost in it?
No, and this is a key aspect the sources emphasize constantly. The experimentee is described as being conscious and aware on at least 2 levels simultaneously.
2 levels.
Yes, they are fully immersed in the experience, seeing, hearing, feeling that other reality, while also remaining aware of their physical body lying there on the floor in the present time. The guide sometimes actually needs to remind them of this dual awareness, saying something like, "Remember, you're also lying on the floor."
That simultaneous awareness? Perhaps that's what makes it distinct from a typical dream, or even just a really immersive visualization. You're consciously present in both realities at once, according to these reports.
That seems to be exactly the state they're describing, and it's highlighted as a key feature of the technique's effects.
Okay, now let's really dig into the theoretical backbone here. The sources provide this extensive, intricate cosmology to explain why these experiences are even possible and what they signify within a larger universal structure. What are the key components of this underlying framework, particularly this multi-plane system and the nature of spirit they talk about?
Right, the cosmology. It's fundamental to understanding their interpretation of the technique. The sources present a model where consciousness is definitely not bound to a single location or dimension. They propose a system of multiple planes of consciousness, each with its own distinct characteristics and purpose within the grand scheme of creation.
Multiple planes. We've heard about the third plane.
Yes, our everyday physical reality and our consciousness primarily operating within it is designated the third plane. It's also called the detail level. We, in our physical bodies, are described as the third plane permanent body of consciousness residing here. But the sources describe several other planes that are considered part of our multi-level being, or at least part of the larger creation structure we interact with.
Can you give us some examples from the sources? What are these other planes like?
Sure, they offer quite specific details on some of them. For instance, there's the fourth plane. This is described as where technicians exist who are involved in organizing and supervising various projects within the creation. Consciousnesses on this plane apparently visit different groups and learn from each other's activities.
Technicians organizing creation. Okay.
Then, higher up, there's the sixth plane, which is referred to as the mind energy plane. This plane is said to have a positive polarity. The consciousness bodies there are typically described as being quite large, rarely under 9 feet tall, apparently.
9 feet tall.
That's the description. A key characteristic of this plane is mobility, not just of the consciousnesses, but objects can apparently move simply upon their inception of a thought or intention. This is also where crystals are described as growing.
Things move by thought. Wow.
And intriguingly, the sources mention that consciousnesses on the sixth plane are fascinated by third plane machinery. Things like cars, typewriters, TVs, elevators, factory machines, and get this, Some of these sixth-plane consciousnesses are said to have actually conceived the very machines that were later invented or manifested here in our physical third-plane reality.
So they thought of them first, up there.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. What about other planes?
Well, there's the seventh plane. This is described as playing a critical role in the whole process of incarnation. Consciousnesses on this plane are said to work with the third plane consciousness that's us to plan forthcoming incarnations.
Planning our lives before we live them.
That's the idea presented. They apparently have access to records of past performance, maybe like karmic records, and can project potential futures using what are called planetary records. This is where individuals are set to select their environment for a new life and even gather the family members and associates they will interact with in that life.
So soul groups planning together on the seventh plane. Okay, what else?
The eighth plane is identified as the plane of energy. It's listed as one of 4 crucial planes, along with detail, which is the third plane, mind, associated with the sixth plane, and concept, the 11th plane, that are necessary to master in order to achieve what they call sonship in the creation. Mastery of this plane, the energy plane, is presented as a significant step in mastering oneself.
Sonship. Like reaching a certain level of spiritual maturity.
That seems to be the implication, yes. A stage of completion or mastery within creation.
And the 11th plane you mentioned, concept.
Yes, the 11th plane is the plane of pure concept. This plane has a negative polarity opposite to the 6th plane's positive. Mastery of the 11th plane is described as the 4th necessity, along with the others, for a consciousness to reach this maturity or sonship. The concepts learned or mastered here are said to be passed down through the lower planes so that the third plane consciousness, again, us, can manifest them into detail mind, essentially bringing abstract concepts into concrete thought and then physical reality through action.
So concepts originate there and flow down.
That's the model. And mastery of these 4 key strata detail, third, mind, sixth, energy, 8th, and concept, 11th, is presented as collectively representing mastery of the entirety of creation substance.
Mastering those 4 is mastering everything. Wow. Is there anything beyond the 11th?
There's the 12th plane. This is presented as the culmination point for this particular cycle of mastery. When a consciousness graduates or masters this plane, they are said to have the option to, well, leave their current body behind as it's no longer needed in the same way.
Leave the body. What happens to it?
This body then becomes the permanent body, a term used specifically that is utilized by the individual spirit throughout future time. The graduated consciousness, now free from that form, then projects a new, apparently more efficient body, which is described as resembling the humanoid form we know.
A new humanoid body. And this 12th plane has significance for names.
Yes. The name associated with this graduated 12th plane consciousness is referred to as the individual's constant or spiritual name. Finding out this name is part of the integration process described in the technique.
Okay, so that's the ladder of planes up to the 12th. And mastering detail, mind, energy, and concept is the key.
It's presented that way, yes, as equivalent to mastering creation itself, suggesting a really deep intrinsic connection between individual consciousness and the very fabric of reality.
That is a complex, detailed hierarchy of consciousness. And the technique, the Christos technique, aims to consciously connect us to these higher aspects of ourselves. Is that the idea?
That's precisely the idea presented. The technique is described as a method for achieving integration with one's various plane consciousnesses.
Integration. How does that work in the session?
Well, the process described within the session, once the subject is in that altered state, involves consciously going to the 11th plane in their awareness, standing before that specific plane consciousness, noting its sex and name, if it presents one, and then performing an act of integration with it.
And then the 12th plane too.
Yes, the same process is then repeated for the 12th plane consciousness. Achieving this integration with both is presented as becoming complete integration with all of your plane consciousnesses. And as mentioned, your name associated with the 12th plane is considered your constant or spiritual name.
And what are the benefits of this integration, according to the sources?
The purported benefits are presented as quite significant within this framework. An integrated individual is said to be able to readily understand the thoughts and desires of their own plane consciousnesses. And importantly, they can receive help with mental or physical problems directly from them.
Help from these higher aspects.
Yes. The sources state quite confidently they never miss, implying these higher consciousnesses provide infallible guidance or assistance once that integration is achieved. This integration is also said to help with planning and executing activities effectively back here on the third plane.
Practical help too.
The sources even mention the possibility of inviting these plane consciousnesses down to the third plane to visit and learn about activities in our physical world, like a cultural exchange within your own being.
So the integration aspect really connects the practical benefits, like the problem-solving and potential healing we talked about, directly to this whole cosmological model of multi-level consciousness.
It absolutely does. It's the mechanism they propose. And central to everything, really tying the planes and the individual journey together, is their concept of spirit.
Spirit, you said it's the center of you.
Yes, the sources repeatedly state that spirit is the very center of you. It's described as originating directly from the Creator, initially as an elemental spirit, the most basic, simple form of spirit, which is actually named by the Creator at the very moment of its release into creation.
And it had that command.
Exactly. As we touched on earlier, this elemental spirit is given that foundational command by the Creator. Go, know my creation, and return it to me. And this isn't just a casual suggestion. It's described as the first recording in the very soul of every individual spirit.
The core directive.
Right. The entire purpose of the spirit's existence and its journey through all the various planes and countless incarnations is presented as the process of fulfilling this command. To move through creation, initiate actions, experience the results, complete cycles of experience, and then return the awareness gained from these experiences back to the Creator.
And the spirit evolves through this.
Yes. The sources outline a specific process of progression for the spirit. It moves through 7 stages of experience to reach full maturity or sonship, starting as elemental, then evolving through fairy, deva, man, angel, manu, and finally son. This journey represents the spirit's expansion of its awareness and its increasing mastery over the creation.
Elemental, fairy, deva, man, angel, manu, son. Okay.
And interestingly, questions themselves within this framework are said to originate from the spirit. They're seen as conceptual in nature, representing the spirit's broad spiritual consciousness seeking understanding. Questions are described as having negative polarity, while answers have positive polarity.
Questions from the spirit. And how does the spirit relate to those plane consciousnesses we discussed?
Well, the spirit is actually presented as the creator of its own plane consciousnesses.
The spirit creates them.
Yes. They aren't separate entities that the spirit just happens to encounter. They are aspects of the spirit itself, created specifically to help the spirit progress and fulfill its core purpose. And the third plane, permanent body of consciousness, our core identity operating in the physical world, is said to work hand in glove with the spirit. It furnishes information from its level, particularly regarding that unfinished business, especially when the spirit actively assists in bringing that information forward during a session.
And that permanent body from the 12th plane.
Right. The old form left behind by the graduated 12th plane consciousness that becomes the permanent body, which is then used by the spirit itself throughout all future time. It becomes a vehicle for the spirit, essentially.
That paints a picture of a really tightly integrated system, doesn't it? Where every level of consciousness and experience is connected back to the central spirit and its overarching purpose.
It's a very specific and remarkably comprehensive system they lay out. And this framework also provides their specific understanding of incarnation and rebirth.
Right, the past lives aspect.
Exactly. Existence, according to these sources, is not just a single lifetime event. It's viewed as an immense panorama of lives. And the Christos technique is seen as a way to consciously access and understand these previous lives, with the individual seeing themselves clearly as the main character running throughout this vast personal history.
The same self through all the lives.
Yes, the sources state that unequivocally, it is the same being, soul, the same self, the same I that links all these lifetimes together, just inhabiting different physical bodies, whether those bodies are male or female.
And the process of rebirth itself?
It's described in terms that directly mirror the technique. The third plane permanent body of consciousness extends its consciousness throughout the tiny body of the infant and then looks out through the eyes and listens through the ears. It's presented as the very same mechanism of conscious projection used deliberately in the Christos session, just occurring naturally in the process of physical birth.
Wow, same process. Why inhabit a foreign body, as they call it?
The third plane consciousness is described as residing in a foreign body, meaning the physical incarnated body, which isn't its native form initially, in order to maintain polarization on the third plane of a planet, like Earth, which one source calls Kalarana. This continues until it has fully mastered that specific plane, the plane of detail. Only after achieving this mastery can it then project its own perfected humanoid body according to this model.
Kalarana. Interesting name. You mentioned an anecdote.
Yes, the source referring to Calorana includes a fascinating anecdote about Anton and Fanta. They are described as the very first two consciousnesses ever to indwell simian bodies on Calorana. Over 6 years, they apparently underwent rapid physical transmutation, developed early forms of speech, and eventually had to leave the simian tribe they were with due to hostility towards their changes. The source even suggests that one could potentially ask to see these early men during a Christos session.
See the first humans on this planet. Extraordinary claim.
It is, and the sources explicitly connect understanding this whole panorama of lives to understanding oneself in the present. They propose that many of our current habits, maybe languages we have an unexplained affinity for, or even unconscious body movements, are actually gained from the various physical beings or incarnations we have experienced over time.
Like inheriting traits from past selves.
Exactly. They even suggest that the reappearance of certain family members or associates across generations can be explained by this process, souls or consciousnesses interacting across lifetimes in recurring patterns. They give specific examples, like one soul being born as Heinrich Schwickard, then later as a Viola, then Wolfgang Schwickard, then Mary Dietz, all within related family lines, or different generations of the Samuel Vanis family all having a strong connection to horses, linking them through this shared association across time.
So family patterns might echo past life connections.
That's the implication. And as we discuss regarding the outcomes, this framework provides their specific explanation for recurring physical problems or perhaps long-standing difficult life situations. These are viewed as unfinished business or energetic patterns carried forward from past lives, often stemming from a specific free will choice made in that previous existence to have that disease or embrace that situation.
And the technique is the way to fix it.
It's presented as the primary means to consciously trace back that origin point, understand it, and resolve it, which, as they claim, relieves a significant burden or feeling and leads to tangible physical and emotional healing in the current life.
It's a truly comprehensive system, linking personal history across perceived lifetimes directly to current health, personality traits, family dynamics, all within this incredibly detailed cosmological structure. It's a lot to take in.
It definitely is. It's a whole worldview condensed.
Okay, so drawing all of this together now, what do the sources claim are the main potential applications and, I guess, the beneficial outcomes for someone who engages with the Christos technique and this whole accompanying framework? What's a payoff, according to them?
Well, as we've touched upon quite a bit, one major reported benefit is simply gaining knowledge. But this isn't just academic learning, like reading a book. It's described as learning quickly and thoroughly from direct internal experience. And crucially, accessing information that wasn't confidently known before, like those incredibly specific details about architecture, clothing from different eras, potentially forgotten languages, or historical settings that seem to just spontaneously emerge during the sessions.
Knowledge beyond your normal reach.
That's the claim. And this ties directly into understanding the self at a much deeper level. The technique is said to lead to the experiential realization that one is a multiplanar being, not just a physical body. Understanding the influences from these perceived past experiences prompts, they say, a reevaluation of your more superficial self-conceptions. It's about genuinely inquiring into and maybe even experiencing the eternal, permanent part of oneself, seeing what is truly you, versus what is simply accumulated experience or personality layers that can perhaps be transcended or integrated.
Seeing the core self beneath the layers. And the practical benefits like problem solving and healing are really strongly emphasized too, aren't they?
Oh yes, very much so. The sources assert that by achieving that integration with one's consciousnesses on other planes, you can then call upon them for direct assistance with mental or physical problems, and the resolution of recurring physical issues by addressing that unfinished business from previous lives is presented as a key, tangible, healing outcome, relieving significant burdens they believe are carried unseen from the past.
What about that intriguing claim about accessing future knowledge?
Right. The sources do suggest that an integrated consciousness can be used to consciously ask and see into the future. They make a bold claim that within the physical creation, there are no secrets withheld from you once this level of integration is achieved. And as you mentioned, G.M. Glaskin, in his writings drawing from these methods, also noted instances where seemingly precognitive elements appeared either in his Christos sessions or in his subsequent natural dreams.
Seeing the future. And the sense of liberation must be powerful too, given those reported experiences like OBEs and conscious flight.
Absolutely. The sources present the technique as offering a way to feel genuinely liberated from the perceived limitations of the physical body, experiencing flight consciously and exploring different realities directly, transcending normal physical boundaries. And ultimately, the technique is framed as a path towards significant personal development, achieving integration and wholeness. Those who successfully integrate with their various consciousnesses are described in the text as becoming among the most integrated persons. The stated goal is presented as accessing one's true self and be encouraged, implicitly or explicitly, to be whole, be perfect.
Achieving your full potential, in their terms. And all of this seems to lead back to that core purpose we started with a deepened understanding of creation.
Yes, exactly. By experiencing the different planes, the intricate relationship between spirit, the various consciousnesses, and the physical creation firsthand, individuals purportedly gain a profound experiential understanding of this entire cosmology as presented in the sources. Learning directly from one's other plane consciousnesses is described as part of this fundamental process of knowing creation.
Fulfilling that prime directive.
That seems to be the ultimate goal. And finally, the experiences themselves, particularly the vivid dreams or internal journeys induced by the technique, aren't just interesting phenomena. They are presented as providing specific personal guidance for the individual.
Guidance for everyday life.
Yes. The sources suggest these experiences offer beneficial guidance with specific, personal, and interpretative meaning intended to help navigate waking life. And this idea extends outward into a broader view within their framework. The implication that everything in our external reality also holds inherent meaning, if one only develops the ability and actively seeks the interpretation.
So the insights gained aren't just about the past or other realms. They are intended to provide clarity and direction for navigating the present moment, the here and now.
That's certainly how the sources frame the potential outcomes and applications. It's a very holistic approach.
It is. It's helpful, I think, to also look briefly at how the sources themselves contextualize the Christos technique. How do they position it relative to other states or practices that people might be more familiar with?
That's a good point. They are quite clear on the distinctions they want to make. As we noted right at the beginning, they explicitly state, repeatedly, that it is not hypnosis.
Right. Very firm on that.
Yes. The reasoning given is that you apparently cannot be hypnotized when you are consciously working with three planes of consciousness simultaneously, which the Christos technique is said to engage. This suggests they believe it involves a level of conscious awareness or volitional control that is fundamentally incompatible with what they understand a hypnotic state to be.
Okay. Not hypnosis. What is it like then?
Well, it is, however, presented as effectively being a waking dream or a lucid dream, a dream state that the subject is consciously aware of and, ideally, able to control or direct. Commentaries included in the sources reinforce this, stating it's capable of inducing lucid dreams, often with that two-way communication we mentioned, and that it serves as a platform or gateway for other ASCs like OBEs and peak experiences.
So closer to lucid dreaming than hypnosis. How does it compare to normal dreams?
They draw a very direct comparison to natural dreams. They consistently highlight the contrast in terms of vividness, detail, recall, and logical structure. Christos experiences are described as being significantly clearer, more detailed, much better recalled afterwards, and following a more coherent narrative thread than typical, often chaotic, natural dreams.
And why are normal dreams different according to them?
Natural dreams, in contrast, are often described in these sources as fragmented, seemingly illogical, and very quickly forgotten upon waking. They suggest that normal dreams might serve a specific purpose during sleep, perhaps acting as compensations for waking life imbalances, or maybe even being false dreams of some kind. And then, crucially, they are quickly erased from conscious memory upon waking, perhaps to prevent confusion with what we perceive as solid reality.
Erased to avoid confusion. Interesting idea.
It is. They do note, however, that dedicated practice and recall, the kind of practice developed during the Christos technique, can also significantly improve the recall of one's natural dreams. So recall is presented as a trainable skill for both states.
Okay. What about the interpretation of the experiences, especially those that feel like past life regression? How do the sources handle that? It's a big claim.
It is, and they offer a surprisingly nuanced perspective here, while still strongly asserting the fundamental validity of the material experienced. One source, for example, thoughtfully considers that the very suggestion that the technique is a method to remember past incarnations, particularly how it was introduced to early experimenters, might play a psychological role.
The power of suggestion.
Potentially, yes. This suggestion could act as a kind of nucleus for the unconscious mind, prompting it to project repressed psychological elements, what Jung might call complexes, or perhaps even communications from the collective unconscious, but presenting them in a form that is acceptable to the individual's ego, namely, clothed in the symbolic reincarnation motif.
So it could be psychological projection dressed up as past lives?
They acknowledge that possibility as an interpretation. However, immediately following this acknowledgement, the same sources maintain that the resulting material, regardless of its ultimate theoretical explanation, whether you ultimately decide it's literal reincarnation, ancestral memory, Jungian collective unconscious archetypes, or projected psychological complexes, is still considered valid and useful for the purpose of self-understanding and revealing underlying psychological patterns.
So useful insight regardless of the ultimate source.
That seems to be their position. While they grapple internally within the texts about whether it offers absolute proof of reincarnation, they lean strongly towards it, providing significant indication for reincarnation, alongside these other potential explanations. But crucially, they firmly state the material's validity for personal insight, whatever its origin. It's a subtle but important distinction they make.
Okay, that's clear. And its relationship to OBEs.
As mentioned earlier, the sources openly acknowledge the similarity between the initial physical relaxation and expansion exercises used in the technique and methods used specifically for inducing out-of-body experiences. This just reinforces their view that lucid dreaming and OBEs exist on a shared continuum of altered states, and the technique potentially bridges them.
And finally, any historical parallels they draw.
Yes, they draw an interesting historical parallel to incubated dreams. They mention the ancient practice found in various cultures where people would deliberately seek meaningful dreams, often by sleeping in a sacred place like a temple, with the specific intention of receiving guidance or healing. This shows, they suggest, a long history of humanity deliberately seeking purposeful, meaningful dream states. They position the Christos technique within that broader tradition, albeit as a specific, structured, modern approach to achieving a similar and conscious access to deeper layers of reality for insight and guidance.
That contextualization is really helpful. It positions the technique within a wider landscape of consciousness practices, while still highlighting its unique claims and methods within this specific framework they've developed. Well, this deep dive, guided entirely by the sources you provided, has offered a truly remarkable look into the Christos technique. It presents such a specific, detailed, and highly interconnected view of consciousness, the self, personal history, and even the cosmos itself.
It really is a self-contained universe of ideas, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And it frames the technique not just as some interesting curiosity, but as a potentially powerful tool, according to its proponents, of course, for radical self-exploration and gaining a profound understanding of the nature of consciousness itself, experienced directly through the very specific lens these materials describe. So whether you, listening, approach this from a purely academic interest in different belief systems and models of the mind, or perhaps as a potential pathway for personal exploration, as detailed within these texts, the ideas presented here about multiplanar consciousness, the purpose of spirit, the potential to resolve present issues by exploring past experiences, there's certainly a rich ground for thought, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Exploring a framework as detailed and, frankly, as unusual as this, even just through understanding the concepts presented as we've done today, can significantly expand our perspective on the sheer range of potential capabilities attributed to consciousness. It maps out inner territories in ways quite different from conventional psychology or mainstream science. It's really about engaging with a different map of the inner and outer universe, as proposed by this specific body of work we've examined.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive into the Christos technique. We've explored its stated definition and purpose, the incredibly detailed step-by-step procedure, the extensive range of reported experiences, and the intricate cosmology that underpins it all drawn directly and faithfully from the sources you shared with us.
It's been fascinating to walk through it in such detail.
It really has. Thank you for joining us on this detailed exploration. It's been a privilege to go through this unique material with you. And as you reflect on what we've discussed today, here's a final thought to carry with you, pulled directly from the heart of this unique system presented in the sources. If, as these texts propose, your consciousness exists and operates simultaneously on multiple planes of reality, and your very spirit's core purpose is to know creation across all these levels, what previously unimagined insights, connections, or capabilities might lie dormant within you right now, perhaps just waiting for the right kind of awareness technique to be revealed and integrated into your present understanding of who you are?
A provocative question indeed.
Something to ponder. Until next time.